Robert William Barker.
For 35 years, millions of Americans began their mornings the same way. They turned on the television, heard "Come On Down," and watched Bob Barker host another hour of The Price is Right.
There is certainly a person or people who could do this show, but you have to find the right man.
He was a familiar presence on daytime television, steady, affable, trusted. He ended every episode with a reminder to spay and neuter your pets. He won 19 Emmy Awards. He had been in American living rooms for more than half a century. The show he fronted became the longest-running game show in North American television history. The stage where he worked for 35 years was renamed in his honor.
I get a lot of love and I get a lot of bruises too.
National polls named him the most popular game show host of all time. When he died in August 2023, at the age of 99, tributes poured in from across the entertainment industry. His publicist called him the world's greatest Mac who ever lived. Behind the cameras, according to 3 women who worked on that show, a different environment existed, one defined by coercion, retaliation, and a workplace culture that went unaddressed for decades. They did not speak publicly about it during Barker's lifetime. In March 2026, they finally did. Sir Robert William Barker was born on December 12, 1923, in Darrington, Washington. He spent much of his childhood on the Rosebud Indian Reservation in South Dakota, where his mother worked as a schoolteacher. He was a citizen of the Rosebud Sioux tribe. During World War I, he trained as a Navy fighter pilot, though the war ended before he was assigned to active duty.
Audience participation show. And when I came home, she said, "Barker, that's what you should do."
He returned from service, completed his studies at Drury College on a basketball scholarship, graduating summa cum laude with a degree in economics, and eventually made his way into radio broadcasting in California. By 1950, he was hosting his own program, The Bob Barker Show, out of Burbank. 6 years later, a game show producer named Ralph Edwards heard him on the radio while driving and offered him the hosting position on Truth or Consequences. Barker later described that call as the most important of his professional life. He hosted the program for 18 years. The 2 men marked the anniversary of that call every year, meeting for lunch every December 21st and drinking a toast to their friendship. They continued the tradition until Edwards died in 2005. In 1972, CBS was reviving a game show that had already been canceled by 2 other networks. The show was The Price is Right. Barker was offered the hosting role. On September 4, 1972, he hosted his first episode at Television City in Los Angeles. He would continue hosting for the next 35 years. At 15 years old, Barker had taken a girl named Dorothy Jo Gideon to an Ella Fitzgerald concert. They fell in love, stayed together through the war, and eloped on January 12, 1945, while he was on military leave. Dorothy Jo worked in the entertainment industry alongside him. She sang commercial jingles, appeared on game shows with him, and was, by his account, his closest companion throughout the years that made him famous. In 1981, Dorothy Jo was diagnosed with lung cancer. She died 6 months later, at 57 years old. Barker later said that he never considered remarrying. "She was the love of my life," he told Esquire in 2007. "In my case, I had my marriage." He continued visiting her grave at Forest Lawn Memorial Park each year on the anniversary of her death. In 1983, 2 years after Dorothy Jo died, Barker began a relationship with Nancy Burnett, an animal rights activist. The 2 remained companions for the next 40 years, though by mutual decision, they never married and lived in separate residences. The death of Dorothy Jo Gideon did not go unnoticed by those who worked alongside Barker on The Price is Right. Barbara Hunter, a former producer on the show who was interviewed for the 2026 documentary, described what she observed in the period following Dorothy Jo's death. "Bob really went into a funk after that," she said. "He was ready to take his own life. That's what he shared with me." Hunter then described a shift that she says occurred once that period of mourning ended. There was a long period of mourning. And then, all of a sudden, he became Mr. Bird, man about town. He knew he was the star of the biggest show in daytime, and Dorothy Jo wasn't there anymore, keeping him reined in. Over the 35 years, Barker hosted The Price is Right. The show accumulated a record that was, by any measure, remarkable. More than 2 million audience members attended tapings at Television City. More than 68,000 contestants were called to come on down. The big wheel was spun over 63,000 times. An estimated $200 million in prizes during Barker's tenure. Over 9,500 episodes were produced. CBS officially renamed the stage at Television City the Bob Barker Studio in March 1998, following the taping of the 5,000th episode. Barker had also been named in the Guinness Book of World Records twice, once as television's most durable performer, and once as its most generous host. He received 14 Emmy Awards as host, and 4 more as executive producer, a role he assumed in 1988, following the death of the show's original executive producer, Frank Wayne. He received a Daytime Emmy Lifetime Achievement Award in 1999, and was inducted into the Television Academy Hall of Fame in 2004. When Barker became executive producer in 1988, he held both roles simultaneously, the face of the show and its final decision-maker behind the scenes. He controlled casting, programming decisions, and the working environment on the set. He instituted a ban on foreign cars and animal-based products as prizes, reflecting his advocacy work. He created several of the show's pricing games. The executive producer title, in a production context, is not ceremonial. It is the position of ultimate authority. From 1988 until his retirement in 2007, Bob Barker held both. The Price is Right was structured around its models, a rotating group of women known to viewers as Barker's Beauties. Broadcast. They were central to the show's visual identity, and their working conditions, according to multiple accounts, were largely determined by the preferences of the man who served as both host and executive producer. Holly Hollstrom joined the cast in 1977 and worked on the program for 18 years, longer than many game shows remain on the air in their entirety. She was 73 years old when she sat down for the E! Documentary in 2026. She had waited, she said, until Bob Barker was dead before speaking publicly again.
She just said I did it better than I'd ever done anything else. And I loved her so much and had so much respect for her opinions, why?
Magazine, he would have sued me again in a heartbeat. Hollstrom says that early in her time on the show, she was pressured to obtain breast implants in order to retain her position. She was told by an executive producer at the time that the procedure would not be covered. If you want this job, you pay for your breast implants yourself, she recalled being told. She was in her early 30s. She got the implants. She kept the job. She remained on the program for nearly 2 more decades. Kathleen Bradley had a different experience of entry. She joined the cast in 1990. The Price is Right had been broadcasting since September 4, 1972. By the time Kathleen Bradley walked onto that stage, the show had been on the air for 18 years. In all that time, there had never been a permanent black model in the cast. Bradley was the first. She describes the atmosphere she encountered as unwelcoming from multiple directions. Viewer mail arrived criticizing her presence on the show. Within the production itself, a colleague informed her that during internal production meetings, held when models were not present, staff members used racial slurs when referring to her. Bradley was 75 years old when she gave her account for the documentary. "I think people should know the truth," she said. "The good, the bad, and the ugly." To understand what followed, it is necessary to understand Deianne Parkinson's position on the show. Parkinson had been a model on The Price is Right since 1975. Before joining the program, she had won the Miss District of Columbia, USA title, placed 4th runner-up at Miss USA in 1965, and served as first runner-up at the Miss World competition representing the United States. She had traveled with the Bob Hope Uso Show, performing in Vietnam in December 1965. She was, in other words, a public figure in her own right before she became one of Barker's beauties. She remained on the show for 18 years. According to accounts from the documentary and from public records, Parkinson and Barker became involved in a sexual relationship in the late 1980s after the death of Dorothy Jo Gideon. Barker himself confirmed the relationship publicly when the lawsuit was filed, stating that he and Parkinson had been involved from 1989 to 1991. He described the relationship as consensual. Other models on the program noted at the time that the relationship had been close enough that there was a realistic possibility the two might marry. The relationship ended acrimoniously. Parkinson left the show in June 1993 after 18 years. In May 1994, she filed a lawsuit against Barker in Los Angeles Superior Court, alleging sexual harassment. The lawsuit sought $8 million in damages. Parkinson alleged that Barker had used his authority over her employment to coerce her into the sexual relationship, that she had agreed only out of fear of losing her position. Barker denied this characterization entirely. He stated publicly that Parkinson had initiated the relationship and that the lawsuit was an $8 million attempt to silence him. The filing of the lawsuit created an immediate pressure on everyone who worked on the show. Barker's legal team began meeting with employees, seeking depositions that would support his account. Holly Hollstrom describes being required, on every visit to the studio during this period, to sit with lawyers who pressed her for statements that would discredit Parkinson's claims. She was also recruited to appear on television programs as a public defender of Barker's character. She declined both. When a tabloid publication attributed a statement to her claiming she had publicly called Parkinson a liar, a statement she had not made, she contacted the publication directly and demanded a retraction. One was printed. Hollstrom describes that retraction as the moment the professional relationship with Barker became irreparable. "That's when I got on his list," she said. Good. In April 1995, Deianne Parkinson withdrew her lawsuit. Her attorney stated that the litigation had become too financially and emotionally draining and that it was damaging her health. A judge fined Parkinson and her attorneys for failing to provide documents ordered during the discovery process. Vindication. Parkinson had accepted a settlement. She signed a non-disclosure agreement. She left public life and largely did not speak again about the matter. After 1995, she became, in the words of the 2026 documentary's producers, something of a recluse. Her current perspective on the events, they noted, remains private. 6 months after Parkinson withdrew her lawsuit, in October 1995, Holly Hollstrom was removed from The Price is Right. The stated reason was weight gain attributed to medication. According to medical documentation referenced in the Wikipedia account of the case, Hollstrom had gained 14 pounds. Hollstrom disputes that this was the operative reason for her termination. She says production had been deliberately positioning her behind automobiles and large appliances on camera, and that she had been cut from 50% of the show's on-screen time before the termination was announced. "How can you say, 'I was not fired because of my weight,'" she said, "when I was cut out of 50% of the show, and when I was on camera, I was hidden away behind automobiles and large appliances." She was told by show representatives that she would be taking an early retirement. "I don't want to retire," she recalled saying. "There's no need for me to retire." But, as she put it, there was no choice. Barker wanted her gone. Hollstrom went to the press. She spoke to Hard Copy, a tabloid television program, about the circumstances of her termination. Barker responded by filing a lawsuit against her for libel and slander. "I was fired," she said. "I had the truth on my side. There was no justice in, 'You can win because you have more money.'" Settlement offers arrived, each attached to a non-disclosure agreement. She refused each one. "He is a liar," she said. "He is a shameless, self-promoting liar. I was not going to sign N&A." Over the years that followed, Hollstrom lost her home. She sold her house, her savings, her investment portfolio. At the lowest point, she was living in her car. She described the legal battle as, "like fighting a giant machine." She described the experience of nearly settling, again and again, and refusing each time. "I just didn't want him to win," she said. In 2000, 5 years after filing the defamation suit, Barker's legal team withdrew the case. They withdrew it 48 hours before the scheduled trial date. Hollstrom then filed suit against him for malicious prosecution. In 2005, that case settled out of court for a reported multi-million-dollar figure. Hollstrom was not required to sign a non-disclosure agreement as part of the settlement. She chose, nonetheless, to limit her public statements about Barker while he was still alive. "If I had spoken," she said, "he would have sued me again in a heartbeat. He wasn't happy just firing you, and you lose your job and your income and your house and your career and your reputation," she said in the 2026 documentary. "He wanted to destroy you." Common Mile. A decade after Kathleen Bradley joined the program, in 2000, Claudia Jordan became the second black model in the cast of The Price is Right. By her account, the culture that Bradley had described had not changed in the intervening years. Jordan alleges that the number of black contestants permitted to appear in a single taping was formally limited to 2 per episode, and that contestant selection cards were marked with the letter B, so that Barker would be informed of a contestant's race before they were called to come on down. "That was a direct order from Bob Barker," she said. Jordan also describes what she observed from her position on the stage. When black contestants approached Barker for an embrace, a reaction common among contestants who had just won, she says Barker would step physically backward. Jordan describes a producer named Phil Wayne as a persistent source of racial demeaning. She says she was regularly instructed to stand between 2 white models in an arrangement Wayne referred to by a racial slur, what he called a reverse Oreo. She says she was assigned to present specific prize categories based on stereotyped assumptions about black women's bodies. She says she was referred to by Wayne as the ass model. "They were negative stereotypes of black people," she said. Eventually, Jordan had enough. Audience, and announced that she could not continue. "I can't do this anymore," she said into the microphone. "I'm going to miss this, but this is my last day." Jordan later filed a lawsuit against producer Phil Wayne Rossi for racial discrimination, hostile work environment, and wrongful termination. She said in the documentary that she had not known until she met Holly Hollstrom through the production of the film that Hollstrom's refusal to stay silent had been part of what gave her the courage to come forward. Hollstrom, upon learning this, said she had had no idea of the effect her legal fight had produced. "I cried," she said. Too. At some point during Barker's tenure, CBS created an internal workplace policy regarding the models that employees came to call the 10-second rule. Under the policy, male production staff were prohibited from looking at a model for more than 10 seconds. Holly Hollstrom described the rule and its enforcement in terms that were unambiguous. "There was no one monitoring how long the guys were staring at the models," she said. "It was a joke. It was an appeasement. They did things that made it look like they were taking action, so you will stop complaining and go away." Hollstrom and Bradley both described a specific incident involving a stagehand who had been on the production for a long time. Bradley says she noticed the behavior, investigated, and concluded it was not isolated. She reported it to producers. No action was taken. Hollstrom said she understood the institutional dynamic. If anyone had gone to Bob because Bob was in charge of the show and said, "I have a problem, I have a complaint," he would have told her to get over it or look for a new job. In 2007, Deborah Curling, a CBS employee assigned to The Price is Right, filed a lawsuit against CBS, Bob Barker, and the show's producers. Curling claimed she was forced to resign after testifying against Barker in a wrongful termination lawsuit brought by a previous producer. The pattern described by Hollstrom, retaliation against employees who declined to support Barker in legal proceedings, appears, according to this filing, to have extended beyond Hollstrom's case. Bob Barker hosted his final episode of The Price is Right on June 15, 2007. He closed it the same way he had closed episodes since 1982, reminding viewers to have their pets spayed or neutered. Drew Carey assumed the hosting role. The show continued. In retirement, Barker remained active in animal rights advocacy. He donated between $500,000 and $1 million to the law schools of multiple universities, including Harvard, Duke, Columbia, the University of Virginia, Northwestern, and UCLA, to fund the study and support of animal rights law. He testified before Congress in support of a federal ban on using elephants in traveling shows. PETA named their Los Angeles office building the Bob Barker Building in 2012. The J&T Foundation he had established in 1995, named in memory of his wife Dorothy Jo and his mother Matilda, provided funding for low-cost and free pet spaying and neutering programs until its closure in 2022.
19 was just as pleasant as number 1.
In 2002, Barker suffered a stroke and underwent prostate surgery. In April 2002, he broke Johnny Carson's record for continuous performances on the same network television show, with 29 years, 7 months, and 22 days as host of The Price is Right. He made his final guest appearance on the show in 2015. Barker died on August 26, 2023, at his home in Los Angeles. He was 99. His death certificate listed Alzheimer's disease as the cause of death, along with hypertension, hyperlipidemia, and hypothyroidism as contributing factors. The Alzheimer's diagnosis had not been disclosed publicly during his lifetime. Nancy Burnett, in a statement following his death, noted that up until 2 months before he passed, he had continued to participate in conversation and daily exercises. He had requested that no funeral or memorial service be held. He was buried alongside Dorothy Jo at Forest Lawn Memorial Park in Hollywood Hills. Roger Dobkowitz, who had produced The Price is Right from 1972 to 2008 and was credited on more than 4,600 episodes, responded publicly in late March 2026 to the documentary via a statement posted to his Facebook page. He described the production as an obvious hit piece and said he had initially avoided commenting because he did not want to extend its public reach. Grievance. He noted that Barker was deceased and could not respond to the allegations. He called it inappropriate to attack a dead person, stating that the adjective brave should never be used in reference to a person attacking someone who cannot defend themselves. Dobkowitz also offered his own characterization of the working environment on the show. The show was a happy place, he wrote. Our working environment was the envy of other shows. Staff rarely quit. The dozens of women, who were in our repertoire of models, came back year after year, happy to be on our show. He suggested that the only unhappy employees were those who had not received the raises or promotions they wanted, or who had been terminated for failing to do their jobs. He indicated he was considering writing a memoir covering his 36 years on the show, which he said would clear up misconceptions and dismiss wrongful accusations. No such book has been published. Barker's longtime publicist, Roger Neal, issued a statement on the day the documentary premiered, March 18, 2026. Barker was and is beloved, and people to this day love him, he said. He was part of the fabric of American pop culture. He was the greatest mixie in TV history. I was honored to have represented him. Documentary series. Dirty Rotten Scandals broadcast 2 episodes focused on The Price is Right on March 18, 2026, at 9 in the evening. The production was based on original reporting by journalist David Kushner, whose 2024 reporting for Business Insider had first consolidated many of these accounts into a single public record. For the first time, Kathleen Bradley, Holly Hollstrom, and Claudia Jordan provided their accounts on the record, together, describing their experiences across the full span of Barker's 35 years as host and executive producer. Holly Hollstrom, who now works in San Diego in trauma support services using neuro-linguistic programming and therapeutic practices, described the experience of making the documentary as both difficult and necessary. It has been emotionally exhausting, she said. It dredged up the memories from the worst time in my life. She also said that making the documentary had been cathartic, that it had given her the chance to present, for the first time in 3 decades, an account of her own that had not been filtered through Barker's legal and public relations teams. The public had heard 90% of Barker's side of the story and almost nothing of ours, she said. So there would be no reason for them not to believe that he was the Santa Claus that they believed him to be. Kathleen Bradley, now 75, described the importance of the documentary in terms of historical record. "I think people should know the truth," she said. "The good, the bad, and the ugly." The Price is Right aired every weekday morning on CBS for 35 years under Bob Barker's tenure. Over 9,500 episodes were produced. The show was the #1 rated daytime program on network television for much of that run. It distributed an estimated $200 million in prizes. More than 2 million people attended tapings in person. 68,000 contestants were called to come on down. During those same years, 3 women who worked on that show accumulated legal bills, lost employment, lost housing, reported harassment without receiving institutional response, and in one case, lived in her car rather than accept terms that would have required her silence. A 4th woman, Deianne Parkinson, filed an $8 million lawsuit, withdrew it, citing the toll it had taken on her health, and disappeared from public life. A 5th, Deborah Curling, filed a lawsuit in 2007 alleging she was forced out after testifying against Barker in a separate legal proceeding. Bob Barker received 19 Emmy Awards, a stage named in his honor, a place in the Television Academy Hall of Fame, 2 entries in the Guinness Book of World Records, and decades of public recognition as one of American television's most trusted figures. He died at 99, with his Alzheimer's diagnosis undisclosed, his family requesting privacy, and no funeral held. The women who worked for him are still living. In March 2026, for the first time in more than 30 years, their accounts became part of the public record. The show that carried Bob Barker's name on its stage is still on the air, now hosted by Drew Carey, continues to bear his name.